Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My wife and I bought our first house a few years ago. We spent months fixing it up, painting the nursery, and getting ready for the baby we'd been trying to have for 2 years. Our next door neighbor seemed normal at first. She was a woman in her 50s who lived alone and kept to herself. But about 6 months after we moved in, things started getting weird. She began complaining about everything: our grass being too long, our car being parked too close to the property line, our dog barking during the day. Every week there was something new. We tried to be understanding and accommodate her requests, but nothing we did seemed to make her happy. The situation got worse when my wife got pregnant. This woman started complaining about us having too many visitors, about my father-in-law's truck being too loud when he came to help with house repairs, about us ordering too many packages for baby stuff. It was like she thought she owned the whole street. My wife was 8 months pregnant on that summer afternoon when everything went crazy. She'd been having contractions all morning, and I could tell they were getting stronger and more frequent. Around 2 p.m., she looked at me with that calm but determined expression I'd learned to recognize. My wife told me it was time and that we needed to go to the hospital right away. Her voice was steady, but I could see the urgency in her eyes. My heart started pounding. This was it, the moment we'd been preparing for all these months. I grabbed our hospital bags that we'd packed weeks earlier and ran to get the car keys. I was so excited and nervous I could barely think straight. But when I opened the front door, there she was. Karen was standing right in front of my car with her arms crossed, looking annoyed as usual. Her own car was parked sideways behind mine, completely blocking me in. I approached Karen and politely asked her to move her car, explaining that my wife was in labor and we needed to get to the hospital immediately. Karen sighed dramatically and said she knew we were in a hurry, but she needed to talk to me about our dog. She complained that he'd been barking every day that week and she was sick of it. She insisted we were going to settle this right now. My wife was about to give birth and this woman wanted to have a conversation about our dog barking. I told Karen this could wait because my wife was in labor and we needed to go immediately. I begged her to please move her car. Karen flatly refused to move until we talked about the dog issue. She said she'd been patient long enough and that we never listened to her complaints. I tried to stay calm, but I was getting desperate. Through the window, I could see my wife doubled over with another contraction. My father and my younger brother were visiting us that week to help with the baby, and they came running outside when they heard the commotion. My father approached Karen with his usual calm demeanor. He's always been good at talking to difficult people. He politely addressed her as ma'am and said he understood she had concerns, but explained that we had a medical emergency. He told her my wife was in labor and needed to get to the hospital and asked her to please let us pass. My brother was less diplomatic. He's only 22 and doesn't have much patience for this kind of nonsense. He asked Karen if she was serious and demanded that she move her car, calling the whole situation crazy. But Karen just stood there like she was making some kind of noble stand. By this time, other neighbors had come out to see what was happening. Everyone was staring at us, and I was mortified. My wife was in pain, I was panicking, and this entitled woman was treating my family's emergency like it was less important than her petty complaints. Karen declared that she didn't care what was happening. She said we had been disrespectful to her for months, and she wasn't moving until we resolved the issue with our dog. That's when my brother had enough. He walked straight to Karen's car, which she'd left running with the keys inside, and just moved it out of the way. Karen started screaming at him, but we didn't have time to deal with her anymore. I helped my wife to the car as fast as I could. She was breathing hard and gripping my arm with each contraction. My wife asked me how someone could be so selfish. Her voice was strained from the pain but filled with disbelief. I told her not to worry about Karen and to just focus on getting to the hospital. I drove as fast as I safely could while my wife tried to breathe through the contractions. They were coming every few minutes now and I was terrified we wouldn't make it in time. I kept thinking about how Karen's selfishness could have put my wife and baby in danger. We made it to the hospital just in time. The medical staff took over immediately, and 6 hours later, our beautiful daughter was born healthy and perfect. Holding her for the first time, I temporarily forgot all about Karen and her ridiculous behavior. Nothing else mattered except our new family. But our relief didn't last long. The next morning, while we were still at the hospital, my brother called with unbelievable news. My brother told me I wasn't going to believe what happened. He explained that our crazy neighbor had called the police on him and was claiming he tried to steal her car. I was furious. It wasn't enough that Karen had nearly made us late for the birth of our child. Now she was trying to get my brother arrested for helping us. I asked my brother if he was kidding and wanted to know what the police had said. My brother explained that they had brought him to the station for questioning. He said he told them what really happened, but Karen was sticking to her story. He said she was claiming he had no right to touch her car and that moving it was theft. Luckily, I'd installed security cameras around our property a few months earlier after some break-ins in the neighborhood. I called my father and asked him to check the footage. My father told me the cameras had caught everything. He said you could clearly see Karen blocking our car, my brother and me asking her to move, and then my brother simply moving her car out of the way. He confirmed it was all right there on video. We immediately sent the footage to the police. When they saw it, they were shocked by Karen's behavior. The video clearly showed her deliberately blocking our car during a medical emergency, refusing multiple requests to move, and then leaving her car running with the keys inside. The police officer told us the footage changed everything. He said my brother was free to go and they were going to have a conversation with our neighbor about filing false reports. Within hours, the charges against my brother were dropped, and Karen was arrested for filing a false police report and obstructing a medical emergency. Justice was actually being served. The legal process took several months. Karen tried every excuse in the book during her court appearances. In court, Karen argued that she had a right to address her concerns with her neighbors. She claimed she didn't know my wife was really in labor and said people exaggerate these things all the time. But the security footage didn't lie. You could clearly see my wife having contractions, hear us explaining the emergency, and watch Karen refusing to move while knowing exactly what was happening. The judge wasn't having any of it. He told Karen that she had deliberately obstructed a medical emergency and then filed a false report when someone tried to help. He said her behavior was not only entitled but dangerous. Karen was found guilty on both charges. She had to pay substantial fines, cover our legal costs, and was sentenced to community service and anger management classes. The judge also issued a restraining order requiring her to stay away from our family. About a week after the trial ended, we saw a moving truck at Karen's house. She was so embarrassed by the whole situation and the legal aftermath that she decided to move away. We never saw her again. Our daughter is now 6 months old in the light of our lives. Back in 1989, I was 19 and working my way through college. Student loans weren't really a thing back then, so I had to hustle with 3 different jobs to pay for classes and books. I worked at a grocery store, a men's clothing store, and a restaurant. The money was decent enough, and honestly, I enjoyed the work most of the time. Entitled customers weren't as common back then as they are today, but you'd still run into them occasionally. I had just watched Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, and I really took his character's philosophy to heart. Be nice until it's time to not be nice. I figured if one of these jobs fired me for standing up to unreasonable people, so what? I had 2 other jobs that would give me more hours if I needed them. It was at my grocery store job where I met the most entitled couple that really tested my whole fire me, I don't care attitude. I was working the closing shift as a checker at our state's biggest privately owned grocery chain. For anyone not familiar with it, this place is basically an institution here in Texas, like Whataburger or Shiner Beer. We were open from 6 in the morning until midnight. During that last hour between 11 and midnight, we ran a skeleton crew on the front end. Just 1 checker, which was me, 1 bagger we called a courtesy clerk, and the assistant service manager. We weren't completely alone though. There were about 40 stockers and vendors who came in after 10 to restock the shelves. It had been a pretty typical Saturday night. People coming in during that last hour either making beer runs or grabbing a few essentials they forgot. At 11:50, all three of us front-end workers were at the end of our 8-hour shifts and ready to go home. I was finishing up with a customer when I heard the courtesy clerk curse under his breath. I looked up to see this young couple, probably in their 20s, walking through the doors. The guy was pushing a shopping cart and the woman had a long list in her hand. They were already arguing about something, and by the way they strolled in, you could tell they were in no hurry whatsoever. The courtesy clerk mentioned they were heading for the beer aisle and hoped maybe it was just a quick beer run. The assistant service manager suggested they might not realize what time it is and told me to give them a warning. Because of my major and some background I had, the managers would often have me make the store-wide announcements. I hit the intercom button and put on my best professional radio voice, announcing that the store would be closing in 10 minutes and asking shoppers to make their final selections and head to checkout before midnight. I checked out a few more people making those last-minute beer runs, ringing up one customer right at 11:59, but that couple with a cart wasn't among them. After the last customer left my register, the assistant service manager followed them out and locked the front door behind them. I sent the courtesy clerk to do a store check to see who was left shopping, then grabbed the intercom again to announce that it was midnight and the store was now closed, asking remaining customers to bring their baskets to the front for quick checkout. The courtesy clerk came back and reported that he had walked the whole store. That couple was in the meat department arguing over chicken or steaks, and they were the only ones left. So we waited. 10 minutes went by with no sign of them. I told the courtesy clerk to go see where they were now. The courtesy clerk made another check and came back, saying they were now on the condiment aisle arguing over which barbecue sauce to get. I grabbed the intercom again, deciding to have a little fun with the announcement since there were only employees and 2 customers left in the building. I announced that it was now approximately 12:15 a.m. and the store was closed, asking them to bring their cart to the front for immediate checkout, ending with a Robin Williams-style good morning. The assistant service manager and courtesy clerk were trying not to laugh at my announcement, and still we waited. A few stalkers even came up to let us know there was still someone in the store. All 3 of us just acknowledged that we already knew. At 12:20, I realized something. We weren't actually seeing this couple. Normally, when people shop, you see them come around one aisle by the cash registers and then head up the next. But it seemed like they were purposely avoiding the front of the store, staying away from us. Time for another announcement, but my patience was running thin. I announced that it was 12:20 a.m. The store had been closed for 20 minutes and asked them to bring whatever they had to the front for immediate checkout, and we kept waiting. I sent the courtesy clerk on another reconnaissance mission to see where they were. He went and stood at the end of one aisle for a couple minutes, then came back. The courtesy clerk told me they were just standing in the chip aisle talking. When I asked what they were discussing this time, wondering if they couldn't decide between different types of chips, he said no, they were now arguing about the guy's ex-girlfriend. The assistant service manager rolled their eyes and gave me a look that clearly said they couldn't believe what was happening. That was it. It was now 12:30 in the morning. I was tired, hungry, had somewhere to be the next morning, and was ready to go home. If they had been shopping with some sense of urgency, I might have had a little compassion. But no, they were just hanging out having conversations. Time to stop being nice. I picked up the intercom for my final announcement of the night. Started off normal, then went nuclear. I announced loudly that I was talking specifically to the couple on the chip aisle having a random conversation, telling them the store had been closed for half an hour and we were going home. I gave them 30 seconds to get to the register or we would lock them in with the stalkers so they could shop all night and check out when the store reopened at 6 a.m. A loud cheer and laughter erupted from the stalkers spread out around the store. I paused for 10 seconds. Nothing happened. So I started counting down from 20, warning them that if I got to 0, they would be spending the night in the store. The guy came flying out of that chip aisle so fast, he took the corner on 2 wheels, almost tipping the cart over. Today I'd say he looked like a contestant on one of those grocery store game shows trying to be first to the checkout. The woman was jogging behind him looking absolutely furious. The guy reached my register out of breath and the woman looked angry. When they pushed their cart up to my station, I went into sweet customer service mode, acting like everything was normal and we hadn't been waiting half an hour to close. I asked them cheerfully if they had found everything okay. Karen angrily said no, explaining they were having a big party at noon the next day and still needed more stuff. She demanded to know why they couldn't finish shopping since they had made it in before closing time. I explained sweetly that wasn't how it worked and that when we said we closed at midnight, we meant it. Ken told me it was my job to wait until they finished shopping. After 40 minutes of shopping, all they had in their cart were multiple packages of expensive steaks, a bottle of barbecue sauce, a loaf of bread, about 10 different bags of chips, and a good amount of alcohol. Only about 6 items were scratched off the extensive list she had in her hand. I looked directly at Ken and told him in my sweetest southern voice that if they had actually been shopping, instead of standing around fighting about his ex-girlfriend, maybe they could have gotten everything on their list. They both gave me stunned looks. The guy started to snap back at me, but the woman cut him off and laid into him about his ex-girlfriend potentially showing up at their party with one of his friends. When they were focused on arguing with each other, I rang up their stuff and got with the alcohol at the bottom of the cart. A couple cases of cheap beer, 6 bottles of wine coolers, and countless packs of other wine coolers. It was the 80s after all. Now here's where we got our revenge for keeping us there till almost 1 in the morning. And the best part is, we didn't do this to them. They did it to themselves. I started pulling all the alcoholic beverages out of the cart. They were still too busy arguing to notice I wasn't ringing up the alcohol, but instead handing it to the courtesy clerk, who was putting it in a separate cart to take back and restock. Karen, still fighting with Ken, started digging into her purse and said she knew I would want to check their identification. Regular shoppers knew our policy. Anyone who looked under 35 got carded. I told her that wouldn't be necessary. Ken looked shocked for a second and suggested that someone should be able to see how old they were. When I hit the total button on their order, it dawned on both of them that the courtesy clerk was walking away with the main thing they needed for their party. Ken demanded to know where the courtesy clerk was going with their drinks. I explained that I didn't need to see their identification because I couldn't sell them or anyone else any alcohol. Ken shouted, asking what I meant and why not. Karen yelled for the courtesy clerk to bring the alcohol back immediately. I put on my sweetest southern customer service voice and explained that I was so sorry, but we couldn't sell it to them. I showed them the timestamp on the receipt, explaining that we didn't start ringing up their order until 12:32 a.m., and Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission regulations prevented us from selling any alcoholic beverages between midnight and 7 a.m. Ken demanded to know what difference that made. I explained in simple terms that our liquor license prohibited us from selling alcoholic beverages after midnight. Karen protested that they had made it through the doors before midnight. I explained that it wasn't whether they made it into the store before midnight, but whether they made it to check out before midnight. The state commission went by the timestamp on the receipt, not by when they walked through the doors. Seeing his party was in jeopardy, Ken went into schmoozing mode, asking me to hook them up just this one time, claiming it wouldn't hurt anything and wasn't a big deal. I dropped the sweet act entirely and told him that was a big no. I explained that state officers regularly check stores after midnight, and if they walked out with beer and got stopped, the store would lose its liquor license, I would get arrested and fired, and the store would garnish my last check to pay the fine. I made it clear that their party wasn't worth my job. Ken called me a jerk. I told him I didn't know him, that he had kept us there almost an hour after closing, had been rude, and wanted me to risk getting arrested and losing my job to sell him alcohol for a party I wasn't even invited to, yet he was calling me names. I pretty much started laughing in his face. Karen threatened to call the next day and get me fired. I asked her what for, pointing out that she wanted me to do something illegal. I told her to please call and let management know I was doing my job, and that I would let my manager know what her boyfriend had called me when I refused to break the law for them. I also suggested she give them her name and contact information so we could pass that along to the state commission as well. Ken said he would forget about it and just come in first thing in the morning before the party to get the beer and everything else they needed. She practically threw the money at me, and I enjoyed slowly counting back her change. When they headed out, I called after them, thanking them for shopping with us and wishing them a great rest of their evening. Ken yelled back a curse word at me. The courtesy clerk was coming back up front after restocking what, for them, was the most important part of their order. Karen asked him if he was going to carry out their groceries, which was part of their job back in the 80s. The courtesy clerk said no, not after the store had already closed. Karen yelled that we all sucked. The assistant service manager unlocked the doors to let them out, wished them a good evening, and got cussed at as well. When the courtesy clerk cleaned up and I was counting down my register with the assistant service manager, something hit me, and I just started laughing. The assistant service manager asked what was so funny now. I explained that they had said their party was at noon, and the guy planned to come back in the morning to get the rest of what they needed and the beer. The courtesy clerk asked what was funny about that. I pointed out that the next day was Sunday. Liquor stores would be closed and nobody, including us, could sell alcohol until afternoon. Our night was finally over, but their party planning problems were just beginning. I dropped out of college to help support my younger sister after our parents died in a car accident. Someone had to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. The store sells everything from phones to washing machines. I usually work the customer service desk, handling returns, exchanges, and helping people find what they need. Most days are pretty routine, but some customers stick with you for all the wrong reasons. This particular Tuesday started like any other. I clocked in at 9, grabbed my name tag, and took my position behind the counter. The morning was slow, just a few elderly customers returning items and a mom buying a tablet for her kid. Around noon, this guy walked in. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing a wrinkled polo shirt and jeans that had seen better days. Nothing too unusual there, but something about the way he carried himself made me uncomfortable right away. He had this smug smile and kept looking around like he owned the place. He approached my counter and immediately started talking, not about any product he needed, but about how pretty I looked today. I gave him a polite but distant smile and asked how I could help him. He said he was looking for a new sound system for his apartment, so I started showing him our selection. He told me I was really beautiful, and that I probably heard that a lot. I thanked him and tried to redirect his attention to the sound systems, explaining the bass response of one model, but he wasn't listening. He interrupted me to say I was model, pretty, and should be on television. I tried to steer the conversation back to the products, but he wouldn't let me. Every time I pointed out a feature or explained a price, he'd interrupt with another comment about my appearance. My skin started crawling, but I needed this job, so I kept my professional smile plastered on. Then he asked where I lived, what part of town. I told him I preferred to keep my personal information private and tried again to focus on the speakers. He brushed off my boundary, telling me not to be like that and claiming he was just making conversation. He mentioned that he lived on Maple Street in a nice, quiet neighborhood that would be perfect for someone like me. The way he said someone like you made my stomach turn. Other customers in the store started to notice our conversation, and I was getting more uncomfortable by the minute. I told him I really needed to focus on helping him find the right product and mentioned that one system was on sale today. He told me I was too serious and needed to loosen up, betting that I was fun when I wasn't working. I asked about his price range, trying desperately to get back to business. Instead, he suggested we grab coffee sometime and asked what time I got off work, offering to pick me up. I told him I don't date customers and asked if he wanted to hear about warranty options. He leaned closer to the counter and I stepped back. His smile was getting creepier by the second, and I could smell his cologne mixed with what might have been alcohol. He told me my problem was that I was too uptight and needed to relax more. I explained that I was just trying to do my job. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. He told me I needed to smile more, that I'd be so much prettier if I smiled, and demanded I give him a real smile. That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. My ex-boyfriend used to say those exact words. He'd tell me to smile right before he'd find some reason to get angry, right before his fist would connect with my face or his hands would wrap around my throat. I'd left that relationship 8 months ago, but hearing those words brought everything flooding back. The customer was still standing there waiting for me to smile on command like some kind of trained dog. The anger started building in my chest, the same anger that had given me the strength to leave my abusive ex. I looked this entitled creep right in the eyes. I told him that my ex-boyfriend used to tell me I should smile right before he would beat the hell out of me. Then I said his total was $18.95 and asked if he preferred cash or credit. The change in his face was instant. His smug smile disappeared completely, replaced by shock and then shame. He fumbled in his wallet, threw a 20 on the counter, and said something about not needing change. He stammered out an apology, saying he didn't mean anything by it. I simply said that cash worked fine. He grabbed the small speaker he barely looked at and practically ran out of the store. I watched him through the window as he got into his car and drove off, probably faster than he should have, in a parking lot. My manager came over a few minutes later, having noticed a sudden change in atmosphere. He asked if everything was okay. I told him everything was fine and that the customer had found what he was looking for. The rest of my shift was uneventful. When I drove home that evening, I kept thinking about the look on that guy's face when reality hit him. For once, an entitled customer got a real wake-up call instead of getting away with their behavior. I never saw him in the store again. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.